Welcome back. Lawmakers signed an economic relief package providing a round of $600 stimulus packages to most Americans and partly restore the enhanced federal unemployment benefit, offering $300 for 11 weeks. The package also includes changes to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Plan. Now, in addition, the New York City Council approved a bill in which fast food workers cannot be fired without valid reason. Joining us now to share more details on this is the founding partner of the Boyd Law Group. We're pleased to be joined by Patrick Boyd. And Patrick, good to have you.
Thank you for having me, and Happy New Year to you, Daren.
Happy New Year to you. And I guess we're back at this place again where Americans will be receiving this stimulus package. Some say definitely not enough, but either way, the package is coming. Share with us a little bit about what we know about this particular round.
Sure. Well, maybe I'll start first with the checks that we know are coming out. There should be there's sort of three types of checks: a $600 check for individuals, $1,200 checks for couples, and then additionally a $600 check for those people who have dependents that are under 17 years old. So three types of checks. One thing to keep in mind with the checks, Daren, it is the case that the first two checks, that is the $600 check for an individual or $1,200 for couples, are graduated. That is, they're based upon the income of the person. So some people may not be receiving those, but certainly those who need it the most are going to be getting those two checks. The check for the dependents, on the other hand, is for everybody. So if you have a dependent at that under 17, you're going to get that $600 check for that dependent or for as many dependents as you have in those particular situations.
So do we find that there's huge differences between this one and the last one?
The allotment of money is obviously less. Some of the other provisions that we're going to talk about have meaningfully changed, and we'll get to those as we go along. But as to the checks themselves, they're going out. There's not a whole lot of deviation as to the issuance of them. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of impact to people. I think the interesting thing about the checks themselves, Daren, is just going to be whether or not with the new administration, there's going to be yet another check and perhaps a whole different matrix and administration administering those checks and using different standards for getting them out for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's talk about the regulations about returning to work. As we look, people will be returning to work. Some regulations concerning that.
Yeah, sure. So the FFCRA, which is that Families First Coronavirus Response Act, I have to always go through it step by step, is now going to change a little bit of the dialogue between employers and employees. Initially, under the CARES Act, if you were home and you were home because you needed to, for example, homeschool and help deal with your kids in their education because of the pandemic, or if you were home because you were sick, or if you were home because you were caring for somebody else that was sick, you were going to be able to very easily have a dialogue with your employer because your employer was going to be required to give you some allowances for staying at home and issuing that care for yourself or for others. That has meaningfully changed. Those entitlements under the FFCRA expired on December 20th, 2020. And so now if your employer says, time to get back to work, there are going to be very limited scenarios in which you can say, I'm sorry, I need to stay home and care for people. I think there's going to be a great deal of debate, Daren, on that subject, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who still have kids at home that need help with school. A lot of people who are still getting ill. I mean, the virus is still spreading meaningfully right at this juncture, but the law and the entitlements to that sort of almost requirement that employers give leave has now expired. And so the discussion with the employers is going to be very different. And I think the impact on who's going back to work and how is going to be very significant in this new year.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit more about the unemployment. When we talk about the topic of unemployment, there is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, and that's that program that was created by the CARES Act. So when we talk about this, I understand there's a couple of changes. And one of the changes is the unemployment benefits have now been extended to 50 weeks from 39.
Correct. That's right. And so those people who were worried about that benefit expiring are going to have a chance to at least have some more security. I do think there was some meaningful insight in the short-term extension, not being that they necessarily intend as Congress not to extend further, but the idea that the new administration may decide on how much further to extend it and that they weren't going to make any long-term decisions at this point in time on that subject. So the extension from 39 to 50 is an extension. I'm not sure, as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be the last Probably more importantly for some of your viewers, though, is this secondary issue. Initially, when you were applying for unemployment benefits under the CARES Act, right, all you had to do was go online and regularly file for unemployment. I'm unemployed, please send me my payments and my checks, and that was it. The new governance scheme now requires that a person claiming unemployment show evidence that they're entitled to that unemployment. So they're going to have to show, here's the income I was earning before the pandemic, then I lost my job, now I'm not earning it. Here's the dollar value I was earning from my small business, now I'm not earning it, please send me my unemployment. Without the documentation and the submission of the documentation to show the loss of wage and the loss of the wage because of COVID, people are not going to be able to are not going to be able to easily collect that unemployment. There was a lot of debate, and I think for good reason, on whether or not this was an important component to put in there. But that's where it sits right now. And just to be clear, different states are probably going to administer to this differently. So we don't exactly know exactly what paperwork is going to be sufficient, how quickly that paperwork is going to be approved. We certainly know that the government resources we have are tested already. And I think that's going to be a challenge for a fair amount of people in terms of making sure they collect. The thing for the viewers is to make sure that they're on their toes and collecting their data, and they have it available to quickly submit it to the extent that they need to justify the continued unemployment when they need that benefit.
Yeah, you kind of been into my next question, asking about what should people know and what should they be doing around this time right now, given the fact that you have these changes and these things in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best idea is to use that old Boy Scout motto and be prepared, right? If you have a set of wage payroll records, make sure you have those available to send by email or fax or whatever. If you don't, make sure you reach out to your employer and ask, hey, I lost my job. I'm going to be asked to verify that I had a job before. Can you please send me my last set of payroll records? I think a lot of people get their direct deposit and they don't have all that paperwork handy sometimes, and they don't think about it. So reaching out to your employer and making sure you have that information available is important, because my suspicion is that the government's not going to be ready to process everything quickly. So those people who have the data right in front of them and are right ahead of the line can get their paperwork in, showing they're entitled to the benefit and get it.
Yeah. Patrick, in the week of Martin Luther King, I got to bring up the Martin Luther King holiday. I want to talk about a new civil rights law that particularly pertains to fast food workers. The New York City Council bill that was approved earlier in January will now be taking effect starting next week.
Yeah, and just a fantastic piece of legislation, and a situation where we're the first city to do this, which is absolutely magnificent. The situation is, and I think this is something that's been recognized by virtue of the pandemic, we have 67,000 fast food employees in New York City. 90% of those people are people of color, 2/3 are women, and these are workers with vulnerability in economic times, sometimes even living paycheck to paycheck. The new legislation absolutely changes a longstanding law, which was that you could be fired at any time for any reason. That longstanding law said, if your boss doesn't like you for whatever reason, they can let you go. You're an at-will employee. The new legislation impacting workers in that restaurant industry says, unless your employer has a good bona fide reason for letting you go, you can't be fired. And if you are, by the way, you have an entitlement as an employee to bring a grievance, to collect attorney's fees, to collect damages, to have a whole arbitration on the case. And if you win the arbitration, by the way, the employer is going to be responsible for paying for all the fees of the arbitration itself. So a huge cushion for these tremendously important workers in New York City, in terms of giving them a good chance to keep their solid job and keep bringing us great food like we love in New York.
Yeah, very much a game changer. Talk to me about the owners. Have we heard pushback, appeal? How's that going?
I think there's been some pushback and some discussion. Quite frankly, I think in the wash of all the things that have been happening in the restaurant industry and in the economy overall, we haven't heard the final word on how this is going to be administered and how everybody is going to, how disappointed or not people are going to be in the administration of it. But right now, it's legislation. It's legislation that was passed. It's legislation that's going to make a huge difference to important and vulnerable people out there in our economic community. And boy, I just think we should be very proud as a city to have had this legislation passed.
Yeah. Before I let you go, let's talk about things that we should be looking out for as the clock is ticking. We are now in almost halfway through January, almost towards the end, moving towards February. What things should we be looking for on the legal calendar?
So certainly with the new administration, we're going to have some kind of new initiative and stimulus. How that works and how it's applied is going to be very important. I suspect that in the new legislation, beyond additional stimulus, there may be some reconstitution and recalibration of some of these workers that right now under the FFCRA just must return to work. I think there may be some contemplation for vulnerable people in the community. I think another thing that's going to be very important, Daren, and I don't think something that people are talking enough about yet is these inoculations, right? We have a certain number of people that aren't getting their shots yet and desperately want them, and that's certainly important. But I do think at some point in time, we're going to have a situation where we have people we want to get the shot and people who are perhaps concerned about getting the shot for COVID. And what are going to be the obligations of employees? Are employers going to be making that a mandatory requirement for returning to work or not? Just as an example, I understand from some statistics I saw this morning that the flu vaccine, which everybody's encouraged to get, right? Only about a third of the population was getting that flu vaccine, even though they should have, and most people would encourage them to. So I think very soon, within the coming months, there will be enough supply of the vaccine. But whether or not everybody's going to trust it and want it and take it or select between the types that are available and trust one more or less, and how that's going to play into the employment law relationship is going to be important development for sure.
Yeah. Patrick Boyd, we're going to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us here and sharing with us. Certainly, we want to get people more connected, but thanks for giving us all the information that we need to know, especially as these new laws come out and how they are taking effect. Patrick Boyd, thanks much.
My pleasure. Stay healthy and stay safe.
All righty. Well, we've got more show coming up. We want you to stay with us. Open will continue coming up right after this.